In a time shrouded by the forgetting of sacred oaths, the land of Israel wandered astray, guided by King Ahab and Queen Jezebel into the embrace of Baal and Asherah, forsaking Yahweh, their deliverer from Egyptian bondage and the giver of lands flowing with promise. It was in the heart of this spiritual desert that a voice emerged, ordained by God himself to confront the encroaching darkness. A warrior prophet named Elijah. Elijah was divinely appointed to awaken the slumber of Israel's faith and to call the wayward hearts to repentance and devotion to the living God. At his decree, the skies withhold their tears, bringing with it a severe drought that would cripple the land, a testament to Yahweh's displeasure. While the land withered, Elijah found sustenance by a brook, fed miraculously by ravens, a demonstration of the provision of God even in times of famine. Undaunted, Elijah stands before Ahab, invoking a contest of the heavens on Mount Carmel's slopes. There, amidst the gathering tribes, his challenge thundered. Choose this day whom you will serve. Let the true God answer with fire. The prophets of Baal raved, their cries rising to futile crescendos, their flesh torn in desperate pleas to their silent deity. Elijah, with biting scorn, suggests their God might be otherwise indisposed, perchance asleep or otherwise engaged. As Baal's silence roared, Elijah turned to the shattered altar of Yahweh. 12 stones he set, representing the scattered tribes, and around this hallowed ground he commanded trenches be dug. Water, precious in drought, was poured upon the offering, filling the trenches, a mockery of Baal's impotence. With arms outstretched towards the heavens, Elijah's prayer pierced the stillness. Answer me, O Yahweh. Let these people know that you are God and that you are turning their hearts back to you. No sooner had the words escaped his lips than fire plummeted from the sky, a divine inferno that devoured sacrifice, stone, and water alike. In the aftermath, the false prophets, once the voice of a nation's apostasy, were silenced, their blood seeping into Carmel's soil. But when Jezebel's wrath promised Elijah a similar fate, even this fierce prophet found himself fleeing into the wilderness of despair. Solitude was his shroud as he lamented his isolation and faithfulness. Yet even there, the voice of Yahweh found him. What are you doing here, Elijah? The prophet's lament was fervent, but it was met with divine directives to anoint kings and a successor, Elisha, and the assurance that 7,000 yet remained who had not bowed their knee to Baal. The story of Elijah mirrors our contemporary pilgrimage. Like Israel, we often craft deities in comfortable images, celebrating the gifts of life and fortune while neglecting the holiness of our Creator. Our modern idols may not be graven images, but are no less pervasive. Gods of convenience, of prosperity, bereft of the divine essence of true righteousness. We, like Elijah, may feel beleaguered in our conviction, alone in our struggle against a society that seems increasingly alien to our values. In our darkest moments, we contemplate surrender, to flee from the vocation that seems to bring nothing but strife. Yet the divine call persists, echoing through our doubts, urging us to press on in our mission. We learn through gritted teeth and clenched fists that the crucible of adversity is where strength is forged and character is refined. The path of righteousness is often strewn with obstacles, but it is in the surmounting of these barriers that we find our truest growth. Let us then, with resolve steeled, press forward. Let the trials ignite within us a fire that rivals the one that fell on Carmel, consuming the dross, illuminating the truth, and purifying our intent. And as we journey, may we cleave to the hope that at the end of our toil, we shall be greeted with the words we yearn for. Well done, my good and faithful servant. With this spirit of tenacity, welcome to the Men of the King podcast, where the chronicles of the faithful are not just recounted, but lived. Here we embark on a quest, not just to narrate history, but to weave our own stories into the tapestry of divine legacy. On today's podcast, I talk with a good friend of mine, Carlos Rodriguez. Carlos is the pastor at Real Church in Midland, Texas. How's things going, man?
And going really well, dude. Taking it day by day, just like anybody else. What about you guys?
Are
How's the
you?
family?
Oh, we're doing good, man. Actually, today is Kinley, the oldest. Well, you remember? I mean, it's her birthday today, so
Oh, cool.
we're we're gonna attempt to maybe head out to the lake. They usually rent a cabin. She has a couple friends over at the KOA, and that was all booked up this weekend. So we rented um, a mobile home, not a mobile home, but like a camper, basically.
Okay.
They're going to put it at the lake. However, we have we have severe tornado producing thunderstorms moving through today, tomorrow, and Sunday. So who knows? It could work out for them and may not. You never know. So we're
I don't think I've heard a tornado siren since I've lived there.
yeah. I don't do y'all not get them out much in Midland?
No,
Okay.
no,
Now
just
y'all
hailstorms, really.
okay. So you're in because
Yeah.
you're in like West
West
Texas.
Texas.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So
so
y'all
we're
don't.
literally right in the middle. Like, I'm 4 hours from Dallas, 4 hours from Austin, 4 hours from San Antonio.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I mean, like, just kind of in the heart. 4 hours from El Paso. So
You're right there in the
just
middle of it all,
whatever. Yeah.
huh? Okay.
Middle of nowhere in the desert land. How old
Anyway,
is she turning?
she is 12 years old. She is 1 year away from being a teenager, man. She already acts like a teenager. I mean, like she was acting like she was a teenager when she was like 7, 8 years old, though. So she's a little diva.
You know,
She's funny because she's always been an early bird. And I think
uh-huh.
I can kind of tell by your messaging you're a little bit of an early bird.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's always been nobody else in the family is an early bird. Me and Cammy, me and my youngest are night owls. Those two are early to rise, and of course
Nice.
Kinley's the only
How many?
morning person.
Y'all have two or three?
We have two.
Okay,
Well,
okay. I
we
can.
have two. We have Kinley and Cameron, and then we recently, in about October, Heather's cousin, who had stayed with us. I don't know if you, I think you were, I think she was around when you guys were at Journey in the Masters Commission, but she actually called us in October. Had been kicked out of her house for about 8 months, and so she'd been kind of just what she called couch surfing, homeless, and
Yeah.
so she's been staying with us in the spare room there since about October. And so we got five of us, and five it's a zoo. We've got five people, two dogs and two cats, and a partridge in a pear tree. It's and they're always, and I mean my youngest and Sienna, I mean, they're both animal lovers, and so like
Uh-huh.
anytime we find an injured bird out in the yard, a bunny rabbit, I mean, just anything, they're like, oh, can we keep it? I'm like, no, no, you don't even give
I like it.
attention. You don't even give attention to the animals that you have, and you want more. Are you crazy? So anyway,
Cool.
well, we'll get into it, Ben. So I had been kind of kicking around this idea for a podcast for a while, and I don't know how, like, I don't know what podcast you listen to. I do listen to like several different podcasts, and I just love the conversational nature of the podcast, and it's so accessible now, and I kind of kicked it around for a long time and thought, well, I mean, there's other guys out there that are a lot smarter than me and probably know a lot more than me. I mean, like, what am I really going to offer? And honestly, it's really not about, it's not really about that. It's really just about, I mean, there are probably people that might listen to me that might not listen to some of, so you just
Yeah.
never know. And so um, I had talked to the guy that works for me. He had kind of started this Men of the King ministry Facebook kind of page where he was just posting kind of motivational stuff. And he had been asking me for a while, is this something that you would want to do? And I was like, yeah. And then it just hit me. It's like, man, that's a perfect kind of combination, because I was kind of struggling with what am I going to call it? So it kind of just kind of come together this year. And I thought, man, I'm just going to interview unfamous people. Not that you're not famous,
Yeah.
but
I'm not by far.
well, none of us are. And that was my point. I want to just interview. I mean, I've got several guys in my network, and you've got guys in your network. And so my thought was just, man, let's just interview and just talk, with ordinary guys, and talk about the Bible, talk about what's going on in our lives. What can we say to motivate and stir each other to good works, to faith in Christ, and all of that. And so that's kind of the purpose. And so I had actually saw Ricky post something where he was watching online. I was like, I need to interview. I need to talk to Carlos, man. I hadn't, we miss it. I mean, since all that's kind of dispersed, everybody's kind of gone their own ways, and we hardly ever see each other. And I was like, man, I'd love to talk to Carlos. So that's when I hit you up, and so here we are.
Well, cool, man. Man, thank you, man, so much for inviting me onto your podcast. One, you inspire me. A guy and I are in the talks of starting one, because we're just always like, man, if we just need to record our conversations.
Yeah.
Because like you said, they're about faith, they're about men, and so many other things. And so, when you invited me, I went and peeked at some of your shows, and I was like, man, this is cool. Like, this is exactly, it's casual.
Yeah.
It's chill. It's men talking about faith and spurring each other on. So, and credit to anybody watching this, because I need to throw this out there. Darren is responsible for my love of the Bible. I remember when I was at Master's Commission I had so many questions, man. I didn't grow up in church. And
Right.
so I've always been one of those personalities. Like, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do something 100%, And so when I decided that I was going to be a Christian when I was 16, the Lord saved me at a camp in Colorado, and then felt called to the ministry. That's why I went to Master's Commission in Sallisaw. And man, you were just a special person that God used in my life to point me to the scriptures and the love for the scriptures. And to this day, man, I had a guy yesterday. He's preaching his first sermon. He got invited to preach his first sermon at a BMX thing that he's over. And he comes in and he's telling me all about what he's got. And in his previous early years, man, he was a motivational speaker. And he came in and he came in and told me what he wanted to talk about. And I was like, man, I said, I think that all sounds great. I said, but we as a preachers of the gospel, we must stay true to the text. Right. And I was like, I love what you're saying. I said, but man, let's stay true to what Paul was saying there in 1 Corinthians. And I credit that a lot to you, because you answered so many of my questions in your dark. That's why your dark office. I love the dark.
Yeah.
And you pointed me to preachers who pointed me to Jesus. And so, yeah, man, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but you've played a big role in who I am today. And I'm thankful for you.
Well, I appreciate you saying all that, and I have to kind of point back, as you know, to Christ. I mean, because other than I always point back to the idea that if it were completely up to Darren wouldn't have been any. I mean, there's just no, and that's the thing about all of us. There's no natural just affinity for the scriptures, and it's completely the work of Christ. But I do appreciate you saying that, and that does mean a lot to me. So thank you for saying that, because sometimes, you do kind of wonder. It's like, well, I mean, are you, because I mean, are you making a difference? And are you having an impact? Because, one thing that I have really struggled with at the church that I'm at now, not so much here lately, but one thing I did struggle with because of my role, you know, at Journey, I was kind of the clown, and I love being the clown. Don't get me wrong, you know, but I remember there was one sketch that I was kind of because we did all kinds of different sketches. You know, we did some funny
Absolutely.
ones, and I think in that period of time we were doing a lot of just funny, and there's nothing wrong with funny. And I mean, I still we were in a class the other night, and I was just cracking jokes one another because if an opportunity presents itself, I'm gonna say it, you know.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
but I had developed this reputation of just this clown, and at
right,
the same time, I'm thinking, but I don't. I mean, I like to be funny, but I also want to be kind of taken a little bit more
absolutely,
serious, like when I'm
absolutely,
trying to be serious. And so there were when I started going to Emmanuel, there were there were numerous people that would tell me, "Oh man, I used to love them sketches, and oh, those are so funny." I'm like, "Yeah, but I don't want to just I don't, you know, I don't want to be just known as that, you know? I mean,
right,
'cause that's
right.
so shallow and like
I agree.
I don't mind being funny, but I do take the scriptures very seriously and
Well, and to encourage you, man, like now that I'm, the lead pastor of a church, people so many times think that, man, it's the path, like, yeah, the visionary leader, all that, you hear all that, but man, one, like you, just pointing people back to Christ and like, this is
Mhm.
has nothing, this is God just gifted me differently than you.
Right,
And
sure.
he's
Oh
gifted
yeah.
me to proclaim, and preach. But what people don't understand is it was people like you, and it is people like you who that most people don't see that make the church go, that make the church, that they're heartbeat of the church, and
Right.
who keep the church grounded. And at our church, I'm so passionate about men, and that's why I love your podcast. I'm passionate about men, leading their families. I tell our church all the time we have a men's breakfast this Saturday, and we're consistently pouring into our men. And I tell them, hey, if we have strong men, we're gonna have strong families. If we have strong families, we're gonna have a strong church.
Absolutely.
And so yeah, I think men like you just haven't been given enough credit, and too many pastors I think have shouldered the glory that isn't
Yeah.
theirs. And not that it's the men of the church either. Like, hey,
Right.
let's back to Christ. So yeah, no, I've always just appreciated you, man, like for real.
Well, I thank you. I thank you for saying that. And yeah, I mean, I can't agree more. I think of guys like two of the guys I listen to a lot now are, um, which it's interesting. I used to listen to a lot of James White, and now
Okay,
I've started listening to a lot of Jeff Durbin. And
okay,
I'm listening to more Jeff Durbin than I am James White, and I don't. There's no particular reason. I'm just it's it's just I guess maybe ease of access. I don't know what it is, but anyway, the point being, you know, I kind of started with James White, and he was an elder. I mean, he was just an elder at Jeff's church, and of course, Jeff was
okay,
also an elder, but Jeff is the primary teaching pastor and all that. But that kind of goes to your point. I mean, a strong, you know, you want strong men, and and you don't want you want a group of men, and that's one thing that I will say we are very fortunate to have at Emmanuel's. We have a group of men. We have there's four elders, and they're all, I mean, just a wealth of knowledge and I mean, theologically love Christ, all different personalities. There's one guy, he cracks me up. He's just so um just matter of fact. And he's like,
yeah,
yeah, he says, the Psalms are my least favorite book. They're just too poetic for me. I just don't get poetry. I just never have, you know. And so, you know, but I love that. And because we're all, you know, we're all different. But then even outside of those four elders, there are, I mean, Matt's there. I mean, you know, Matt.
yeah,
I mean, then there's several others that had I don't that have this just depth to them, and so
yeah.
you just want that, you know, and I agree. Strong men in the church is going to lead to a strong, healthy church.
Um, absolutely, yeah.
So I wanted you to tell me. Like, take me through the history of Real Church. Tell me
Yeah.
kind of
Okay.
how all that started, man. That's really exciting to me because that was a church plant, right?
Yeah, it was a church plant that my pastor, who's an elder on our, he's an elder here at Real Church until we got 5 men in our church who were in application to become elders, and so that's just been a slow process because becoming an elder is a life call, and we want them to take it seriously. And just like you guys, like man, these guys are just men who I told them from the beginning, like man, you love the Lord, you love your wife, and you love your kids, and you love the church,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the kind of men that we need leading our church. And so man, it was about 2019. So after I graduated from Master's Commission, went to become a children's pastor right out of that, serving my pastor, who was one of the elders,
Mm-hmm.
but was there for 2 years. Moved to Midland in 2015 and was a children's pastor. And at the church I was, and then became a youth pastor, and eventually was his number two guy, helping him out as kind of executive role.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was about 2019, man, where I really felt the pulling in my heart. Like it wasn't time to plant a church, but I really felt the Lord was leading me to get ready to plant a church. And I've always knew I wanted to just always knew I wanted to pastor a church. I didn't know what that was going to look like or whatever.
Sure.
And so 2019, I started telling my wife I had built this relationship with this Acts 29 church here in town that we have. And man, just a friendship, going to lunch together. And he casually had mentioned, like, hey, man, I really think you'd be good for what we got going on over here. He said, we have a church planning residency through Acts 29. And so,
Hmm.
um, and at that time, I was just like, man, no, I'm not ready yet. Like, it's not that time. And well, then um, it, about August of 2019, I believe. I can't remember. But I told my wife, it was one day I just woke up and I told my wife, I said, I think I want to ask more questions about this. Um, and fast forward, 2020, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, 2020. Um, you know, just like most churches, we fasted at the beginning of the year, prayed. And by that time, I felt like I really knew that it was time to enter into that season of getting ready to plant a church. Um,
So
and so
that was 2020.
2020.
Oh
Yeah. So this
wow.
was before. So we'll get to the pandemic because it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. And so I'd been at this church for a while, like, served that church faithfully, loved that church, but I just knew it was time. And so the end of the church fast, we're doing a night of worship, breaking the fast, first fruit offering. And it was that night, like me and my wife, we were going down. We had actually told our friends at the time, we are up at the top of the church was kind of up like this, the auditorium seating. And
Mhm.
hey, before we go down there and give our first fruits, we want you guys to know that we feel like the Lord's calling us to into this church planning residency. And um, we're weeping. I'm like, man, this is gonna be an exciting but yet, you know, unknown territory. And so obviously I had that hard conversation with my pastor at the time, and we had decided an exit time, stuff like that. Well, my first Sunday at the new church where I was in the church planning residency, the pandemic hit.
Oh
And so it was
wow.
actually that week, and we were actually one of the first churches that uh, told like close the church doors and people.
Mhm.
So my first Sunday in the church planning residency at this new church was at the church telling people, "Hey, you can't be here. Go home."
Oh nice.
And so for the next few months, I was at home with my family, and I had taken on the role of their youth pastor at the time. And so from March till July, I think, um, we weren't going to the office. Like
Mhm.
honestly, I felt so bad. I was just like, man, I feel like I'm not doing anything. Like, you remember that
Right.
time was such a
Oh
crazy
yeah.
time.
Oh yeah.
And so they were like, hey, like this wasn't your fault. So just, spend time with your family. Obviously jump on staff meeting calls, read some church planning books because the residency had been put on pause. Um, and I hadn't even started the residency. And long story short, man, my wife and I, there's a situation that rose up, and we were pretty hurt, and I walked in and resigned after some counsel that I received, and I mean, we were desperately hurt, man, and um, so exiting a church, that's always hard. Like if
Hmm.
people have been in ministry, like it's
Oh
just
yeah.
it can get ugly. It's not always as pretty as people think. And then going into a new ministry where we knew no one, nobody in the church, and and then getting hurt, like felt like a trying time, man. And then the pandemic, obviously, like
Yeah.
uh in the midst of it, my wife was pregnant with our third kid, and I was just in that, man, I was just in a time like, God, what are you doing? Like this was
Right.
not the plan.
Right.
And so I resigned late August of 2020. And so just to put some context in it, man, I'm in a city where oil and gas make us go. Like that is the
Yeah.
heartbeat of
Right.
our city.
Yeah.
And so I got a Bible degree, in a oil and gas city.
Right.
Nobody's hiring, and if they're hiring, they're not hiring a dude with a Bible degree.
Right.
And so, because I was convinced, I was like, I'm done with I've been in ministry my entire adult life, and I'm
Yeah.
done. And I remember I was working out in the garage, and my wife was like, "Hey, if this is what the Lord put on your heart, we need to move forward with this." Well, that whole situation had connected my pastor that I was working for right out of master's commission. It had connected us because I had called him, and he had to be involved, and man, lo and behold, he was like, man, I called him. I was like, hey, do you want to plant a church in Midland, Texas? Like, I don't want to do this on my own. I would love some elders to cover us. And and he said, absolutely. That was, I mean, that pastor and elder were the one um, who ordained me as a minister. Like, and so they were close to my heart, and so they had elders. I mean, did all that, and they're like, all right, let's do it. And so we start off with a Bible study. My wife is from Midland, and
Hmm.
so all her family's here. At that point, I had been in Midland about 5 years, and so obviously relationships were built. And I was also coaching basketball at a Christian school here, so I just, even outside of the church that I was at, just relationships were built in the city.
Hmm.
Coaching my kids, sporting teams, um, and so late 2020, we started a Bible study at our house. Just posted on my Facebook, hey, and the first night about 40 people showed up to our house,
Oh
and we were
wow.
blown away. Yeah, we were blown away,
That's great.
uh and I was honest with them from the beginning. I said, hey, like we desire to plant a church here in town. And so in that time I hadn't even thought about the name, whatever. And moving forward, I've obviously we were like praying through that, uh and that's where the name Real Church came from. In two different instances, I had two friends uh, who either like served in the youth ministry that I was leading or whatever. When I told them I was stepping away to the church planning residency, they just said, "Hey, one thing I appreciate about you is that you've just always kept it real." Um, and so that kind of stuck with me.
Yeah.
And I said, "I think the people are hungry for a quote unquote real church,"
Hmm.
and so now I started meeting with men. There was 5 men that were at the Bible study. Obviously, there was more, but there was 5 that particularly. I was like, I took them each individually to lunch, and I was like, "Why are you here? What are you looking for? This is what." And then they're asking me questions, what the church vision and mission, and what do we believe, and those 5 men agreed. And so with 5 families, we started meeting weekly, and so that shrunk down from like 40. Obviously it always
Hmm.
shrinks,
Yeah.
and just praying and asking the Lord to open a place for us. Well, also in Midland, because everybody thinks everybody makes oil field money. Like the real estate here is insane.
Yeah.
And so looking for places to have church, it was just difficult. Well, in that time I had started working in a local school here. And now this is now 2021, but people are still uptight about the whole thing. People in the
Mhm.
schools are wearing masks. I mean,
Yeah.
parents can't even go have lunch with their kids. And fast forward, I just ended up like we couldn't find a place, and I asked the principal, "Hey, can we use the school?" And he said, "Let me get back to you." And I remember the night I was putting my little girl to bed, and I got the email. He said, "Hey, we're ready to move forward with this." And
Wow.
on in March of 2021, we launched Real Church for the first time. So it was a couple of weeks ago that we celebrated 3 years.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah, it wasn't awesome at the time,
Yeah, no, no, and you, but that's one thing I kind of I'll kind of write notes because I don't. I've one thing that I've been working on is when you're having conversation, um I have noticed I have a tendency to cut people off, and so I try not to do that, and I try to be real intentional about that.
I have
So
that same problem.
yeah, I mean, like, and because you don't want to forget what you want to, you don't want to forget what you're, because I have that problem too. I'll think about
Yeah.
it like, well, what was I going to say anyway? But you mentioned hurt, and one thing, one thing I've been talking to my daughter about, um, because she joined a softball team this year. She's the youngest one. She took like 3 years off. So she's way behind. I mean, she's
Yeah.
really way behind. You take time off, and that's, she's a kid. I mean,
Yeah.
she's not worried about, the time. I mean, she just knew that those 3 years she just didn't want to play, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But she's behind, and so she's on the bench a lot, which honestly,
Okay.
it's good for you sometimes to sit on the bench and wait, and um and she's just like, I'm just not as good as the other girls. I'm just not good, and blah, blah, blah. Just really discouraged. And so I've been telling her, I said, listen, you can either use that for motivation to just quit, or you can use it as motivation to get better and
Absolutely.
and fight. Because one thing I was listening to, I think it was I can't remember who he was interviewing, but Joe Rogan was interviewing a guy here a while back, and here a couple of days ago, and he was talking about his dad and how his dad, there was some, it was like working out or running or something like that, and he was talking about, he says, I never understood why my dad um said this, but I get it now, because we would always ask him, why are we doing this? Why are we out here doing this? This is really difficult. This is really hard. He says, that's why we're doing it. We're doing it because it's hard. If it was
Yeah.
easy, everybody be doing it. And we're doing it because it's hard, because it's worth doing. And I thought that was really, really good, because we live such easy lives. And to me, I would say that to men. I mean, like, listen, church is like anything else. I mean, like, there's going to be times where you're going to face difficult times in church.
Absolutely.
I've
Absolutely.
I've faced them multiple times, but every time it's motivated me not to quit, but to just, you know what, I'm going to get better, or I'm just going to keep pressing on because I think this is worth it. And so,
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of mention that I appreciate your sentiment, because you were saying I'm done, because I don't know how many times I've been
Yeah.
I'm done, but
Yeah.
and I think it's okay to kind of get to that point to where, like, I'm done. And of
Yeah.
course the Lord's like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
No, you're not. I'm not in
Yeah.
full-time ministry, but I'm an elder of a church, and have responsibilities, have things that we do, and so
Yeah.
but I would just, I would want to just kind of like talk about, or just kind of like hit on that point. Like, I think
Okay.
that you just knowing that, listen, man, there are times in life, there are times in the church you're going to be hurt, but I would just encourage anybody, man, don't use that as motivation to quit. Use it as
Yeah.
motivation to get better and press on, because this is worth it. I mean, ministry is worth it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I real quick, just to hit on your point on that. One kind of the language I've kind of been using with our church is, hey, like spiritual formation, especially men, but really to the whole church is, hey, like spiritual formation is not pretty. It's
Nope.
not fun.
No.
It's long and hard,
Yeah.
and I had taken a saying from a guy that you pointed early on in my days, Matt Chandler says, God wants to do a deep work in you over a long period of time in the context of community.
Right.
And so that deep work most of the time is going to come through hurt. And what God did in my heart, man, in those times, like I remember like just weeping in my wife's lap because again, coming out of a season where church we loved and we served, and man, I gave literal blood, sweat, and tears to to became a black ball of the church. Like don't
Mhm.
he's not hearing God. He's not
Right.
the whole thing. Um, and let me, man, I love that place. I'm thankful. I drive by that church every day and I pray for
Mhm.
them. Now, especially I'm in the shoes of the lead pastor role. Um, I'm grateful for what I learned there and what he showed me. But that hurt, man, really drove me to like one, it drove me to the Lord,
Mhm.
number one.
Right. Yeah.
That always does that. Um, Whether it was out of anger, different stages, but yeah, man, it was tough. Like and it took me like I just want to go. Literally, I just told my wife, I was like, I just want to go to the oil field and make money. Like that's
Right.
what I want to do. I
Right.
was driven to that point, and but also now in hindsight, I look back and that has helped drive the heartbeat of our church.
Yeah.
Um, and man, the conversations we've had, just to give you a little bit more context, we started off with 10 people in a home. We started having church in the home, and man, this weekend on our campus, we'll probably see around 400 people.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Um, and so I say that not to boast, but I say that to like that's 400 stories that are coming
Yeah.
into our church. And so I'm sitting across tables from men, from families, and I'm hearing like, man, I don't know how many stories of people who've been hurt by the church.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think I really do believe that we're in a time where, you know, people have come out of their deconstruction and they realize like nothing else is working as well,
Right.
and
Yeah.
my only hope is in Christ. And so having these conversations with people, just like we were really hurt, um and the heartbeat of our church is just obviously Jesus and people, but we want people to know like, hey, you can heal here. uh and I've been honest, like you're going to get hurt by someone,
Right.
by something I say.
Right.
um and the worst thing you can do is run.
Yeah.
Just come
Yeah.
talk, be honest. Let's be real. Let's stay true to our church name, and let's allow God to work in that, through us together, and moving forward to make, because I also, not only does it make us stronger, it makes the church stronger. When you know I had a guy come to me, and we had hit a moment a few months ago actually, and he goes, the way you walk through that, um, really encouraged me. And um, man, to know that we have a strong leader like that who can endure something like that and keep moving forward. He's like, I could be a part of a church like that. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I would just encourage, people, men, hey, you're going to walk through some hard things.
Yeah.
Um, but let I recently said it like this: just don't ask God, like, God, what are you doing? Ask God, what are you trying to do in me
Mhm.
in this? And so that'll just change our perspective on what we're learning in that time of hurt.
Yeah. That's right. And then that's it. I mean, there's always something that I think that God is trying to do in us. I can look back at one of the things that I dealt with, and I use this a lot as a good example. There was a time shortly after I had left a church and experienced some hurt and but just out of the blue. And I actually have heard, I actually listened to another, I don't know if this was a podcast. I think it was kind of like a podcast type deal. But anyway, it was talking about a guy that had left a similar situation. And this hit me about 39 years old. And started having just out of nowhere anxiety, just bad anxiety. It would like heart racing. Of course, I'm 39, about to hit the dreaded 40 is what everybody says. It's, the dreaded 40. It's not that big of a deal, really. But anyway, thought I was having heart problems and all that good stuff. And so, I mean, I drove myself to the ER, and of course, Heather, she's just like, let's go to bed. And just like, I mean, like, no, she was just like, I mean, if you think yeah, go. I mean, this was like, I remember one night, I was literally up, like I didn't sleep the entire night. I mean, like every time I would start to like fall asleep, it would just hit again. And
Yeah.
so really started like praying about this anxiety and just like, what is going on, And then I kind of stumbled across John Piper's. He had a I don't know if it was an article or a video or something on anxiety, and he was in Philippians, where it says, be anxious for nothing, but in everything, present your request and make them known to God. Probably butchered that, but it's something to that nature, and he was talking about how anxiety should drive us to prayer, which one of the things that I had always, and still do struggle with in my Christian walk is praying as regular as I should. And I looked at that, and I realized, this it'd be kind of weird to look at it this way, but it's kind of a gift, because I have this anxiety. I'm starting to have anxious. Well, it almost kind of reminded me, oh, I should probably pray. I mean, like, so,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I mean, like, we look at those hard things that we go through in life. I mean, like, there is something there. I mean, that God can use those to grow you, to stretch you, to make you more and more into his image. And I think that's important. One thing you said is, one thing, you were kind of talking about the hurt that we experience at church. This is something that, I mean, like, over and over and over, I've dealt with in the church. And again, every time it's really just pushed me to just kind of press in a little harder, even though I'm not in full-time ministry right now. It's just, you know as well as I do, once you're not in ministry, ministry's kind of in you. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
like it's in me. Like, all
Yeah.
right, it ain't going anywhere. And so it's just drove me to pray, maybe in different capacities, but it's driven me to go even further into it. And one thing that I have kind of come to the conclusion is that it's it's very easy, especially in our day and time, to get offended, to get hurt. But I think it is important to realize, number one, that the people that hurt you, they're just people. I mean, they're
Absolutely.
just people.
Yeah.
We're all people. We're
Absolutely.
all doing, what we think is right. I mean, and a lot of times we are doing the thing that are right. A lot of times, the things that God is doing is going to offend people. And
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, I mean, we're people. We got to give each other a break. We
Yeah.
got to give each other grace.
Yeah.
And like, this
Yeah.
guy hurt you, so what? Get over it. I
Yeah.
mean,
And man, just if we could pause, I tell people all the time, like, hey, you hurt people. I hurt
yeah,
people.
right.
Like, don't act like it's just, I think we've there's been, and it might be based on the teaching in the pulpit. That's it. It's always like, you need to forgive, you need to forgive. And yeah, I absolutely believe in that. You need to forgive. And man, when I teach on forgiveness now, I never teach it without saying some of you need to go ask for forgiveness,
Yeah, right.
because
Right.
the church doesn't. It's always you need to forgive, you need to forgive.
Mhm.
And man, we have to remember, hey, just like those people that hurt us, we hurt people.
Yep.
And so one thing personally that I'm working on as a man is just saying, I'm sorry,
Yep.
starting with my wife, starting with my children.
Yep.
You want to be humbled? apologize to your children.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Oh yeah. That's
I've apologized to my staff. Um, just being better at that because again, I'm human and I'm gonna hurt people.
yep.
In the 3 years, it'd be asinine to think that I haven't hurt somebody in
Yeah.
these 3 years.
Right.
And so yeah.
Yeah. And the other part of that is just have conversations. I mean, those conversations are not easy. They're not I find the hardest part about those conversations is just going to the person and say, "Hey man, let's have a conversation." Usually
Yeah.
after that, it's usually pretty good. And that I
Yeah.
think has been the biggest roadblock. I know in this area, that has been the biggest roadblock to hurt is the fact that people are not willing to have conversations. Man, have
Yeah.
conversations, talk this because you're going to find out that you probably had some misconceptions. That's one of the things, and I'm not going to go there yet on this podcast, but one of the things I would love to do eventually is me and Chris were talking about that the other day is get some different perspectives and talk to people who have maybe some like different doctrine over here or different beliefs. Talking to he had a guy that he was pretty staunch atheist, and so I'm just like, would you be okay with having him on there? I said, yeah. We had a guy comment on one of our TikTok videos. He was LDS, and I'm just like,
Okay.
man, I'd love to reach out to that guy and like have him, and
Yeah.
just and talk and just because a lot of times it's not just talking at people. We talk at people a lot, but one thing I love about some of the podcasts I listen to, specifically Joe Rogan, is just how he listens. I mean, the guy he's just like, hey
Yes.
man, and he's had some pretty funny reactions. There was one guy I saw, just a tiny clip. He's like, "Whoa," like, and that may produce that. Whoa, okay, but
Yeah.
it's okay, and
Man.
conversation is so helpful for society and for
Absolutely.
we don't always have to agree, but let's at least have a conversation about it, man.
Yeah. And what I'm teaching people and trying to again better myself is ask in those conversations, ask more questions. That's
Yeah.
what Joe Rogan's so good about. He asks
Yep.
questions,
Hmm.
you know. And so I tell our staff, I tell our team leads, like, you want to witness to somebody at your workplace. I tell our church, you want to witness to somebody at the ball field, like you said, we're always trying to talk at people.
Hmm.
And the best way to be a witness is to ask
Yep.
questions
Oh
and
yeah.
create that space. Because one, people love talking about themselves.
Yeah.
And so if you ask questions, they love talking about themselves. And man, but that also just breaks down some walls. Like, you can even, I tell easy as is like, hey, like I had this thought the other day. I read something. What do you think about that? What do you think about
Right.
abortion?
Hmm.
What do you think about, and that automatically, if people can be heard, they love that,
Yeah. Yep.
and the more likely they are to listen after they've been heard. Again, you might not come to an agreement, but now
And that's
you've just
okay.
opened up yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
We have people in our church. Uh, man, I got a guy right now. He's leading our men's Bible study. He is a cessationist,
okay.
and we got people in our church who grew up like Pentecostal 3 hour
Right.
services,
Right.
like, and I tell people like we are truly a unique church. But I tell them, I'm like, I love that we can fellowship together.
Yep. Right.
That's unity.
Yep.
That's true unity,
Hmm. Right.
and so I love that.
Yeah, I remember when this is kind of so my wife was raised like Pentecostal assembly esque charismatic. I mean, I'll just say,
Yeah.
charismatic. She never really, I mean, I think she always kind of like, I mean, like she believed the basics, Christ died for my sins and that stuff. But all that stuff, and then like, she never really participated, and it was just like, well, I mean, it kind of seemed. But I'll tell you, and I'll say this, I have even I grew up Baptist, and very traditional Baptist,
Okay.
had kind of a stint in the charismatic realm. And the main reason why I went searching kind of in the charismatic realm or faith or whatever was because I did not get satisfactory answers to my questions when I was asking about the gifts and stuff like that in my Baptist church.
Okay.
It was just kind of like, they gave me it was almost like a scripted answer, and I hate scripted answers. And then like,
Yeah.
let's talk about it. Like, why do you believe that stuff has passed away? And
Yeah.
I'm okay with the answers that they'll give, because I'm not a I guess I'm kind of a pseudo I'm not a cessationist by any means, but I do
Yeah.
believe maybe that some of those have anyway. But
Yeah.
me and my wife really had some hard conversations when she found out that I was more reformed in my thinking of
Okay.
the on election and stuff like that. And I would tell her, and this is kind of going to point back to what I said very first when you was talking about how I had influenced you and everything like that. I really believe
It's
that
your
my
fault that I went through a stage cage Calvinist time.
yeah, it probably is. It probably is. Uh, but I'm telling you, like I don't think that I was ever stage cage. I mean, or is that what you call it, stage cage? Or yeah. So I don't think that I was ever there, because I've always just believed that, like, if you don't believe that, that's fine. I mean, like, it's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And that's what I told my wife. I said, I look at that doctrine. I have a view of that doctrine is, or my view of that doctrine is, I look back on my salvation, and I can't take any glory for that, because if it were up to Darren, even still today, I see traces of this, that if it were up to me, I would not be pursuing God. I would not be
Yeah.
pursuing Christ. I wouldn't be.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't be. I'm too wicked at my
Yeah.
in my heart of hearts. But it's like, so I look back on my salvation as a 7-year old, didn't even really know what I was really doing, but I just knew that there needed to be some like, I hate to talk about it
Absolutely.
transactional, but
No, 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 yeah.
I remember that night like it was yesterday. Mom in the kitchen. I went to her and said, "Hey, mom, I need to talk to you." But she didn't know what I was wanting to talk. This is a 7-year old. She said, I'm busy. I'll talk to you later." I went and prayed by myself as best as I knew how. And so that's how I view that doctrine. But we had that, we were having that conversation, and like
Yeah.
she got mad. I mean, she was getting
Yeah.
mad, and I said, "Babe, listen, it's okay. I mean, like, I'm not asking you to believe this. I'm not asking
Yeah.
that you." And I mean, she's kind of, I think, come more around to it. I don't think that she fully kind of gets it, but I mean, it is what it is. But again, it's not important that we agree on everything. I mean, it really isn't.
Right.
Me and her
Well,
have a
and
very happy marriage with
can I
what
share a
it does.
thought?
Yeah.
So, like, not only should we're not going to agree with everything with people, doctrinally. Man, what I've recently been saying to people is like, there's some things I remember. I was working with a guy who was Word of Faith, and we were in
Mm-hmm.
a like underneath a pastor who was AG. I'm just 2 years out of master's commission. Again, I was super reformed in my thinking and
Right.
my beliefs, and he came to me one day and he's like, because the way he knew, I mean, you pick up on that stuff if you like that stuff,
Oh yeah.
um, and I said, Ken, I was riding in the back of his car with his wife. Him, he's driving, she's in the front, I'm in the back, and he goes, "So you believe in election?" And at that time, my belief, I said, there's things that I believe about the Bible that I don't like that I believe.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
Like, who says I like that? Who says
Yeah.
that? Like, I agree with God. Like, but obviously, that's something that I'm working through. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not going to be the right one. God's the right one. His
Right.
word is true. I'm not
Right.
true. What I think is not true. His word is true. And I was like, and so I tell people, man, like, when you're reading the scriptures, you you have to wrestle with things.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just, oh yeah, okay.
Right.
Like, obviously we want to believe the scripture, but in all reality, it's not. We read it and it's like, okay, it's true. So I think it's true. Like, no, I wrestle with it. I'm like,
Right.
why
Right.
is that true? Why is that even in the Bible? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what in the world? And so
Right.
I'm wrestling with people on like, okay, this is what we believe, this is what you believe. And then I'm wrestling with the Lord, like, God, why did you say that?
Yeah. Right. I remember, I mean, I love John Piper's take on it. I remember he said he was in college and I can't remember if it was a pen or something like that or a rock, and he'd walk up to his professor and he'd hold that thing up and he'd drop it. He says, I did that, and he said that when he come to terms with that as a doctrine, he said, I literally wept. He says, I did not like it. So I mean, and I think, um, and it's kind of one of those things where I never wrestled with it. I I just thought, well, I mean, that's what the Bible kind of says.
Yeah,
So, like, I mean, okay. I mean, like again, I look back at it um as a means of gratitude, like because it's like I mean, if I were left to myself, who knows what I would be, and
yeah,
so I look at it in a manner of just gratitude and knowing myself, knowing the wickedness that lurks in my own heart. I mean, to me, that's
yeah,
and again, those that watch the podcast, and I mean, like you might not agree with me, and that's fine. I'm okay with
yeah,
that. You know,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
well,
That's one of those close-handed, you know,
yeah, yeah,
issues. Or I'm sorry, open-handed issues. Those
yeah,
one, like, hey,
right.
you believe that? Okay, you know,
Well,
you believe Jesus is the only way? You
and the fact is, folks have been debating that for ever since the probably maybe not ever since the foundation of the church, but for a
yeah,
long time they've been debating that. And so,
yeah,
much smarter men than I have debated it. So I'm just like, I'll leave that to them, and that's
yeah,
typically, at least right now, until I'm proven otherwise through the scriptures that that's not the
yeah,
case. Then I'm just
yeah.
that's what I'm
That's
gonna.
and one place I've gotten more comfortable landing too is, um, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let me
Yep.
keep wrestling with that. Like, God is there's mysteries of God that I just don't know, and I'll never know. And there's things that Scripture's very clear about, and we'll be clear about those things. But there's things that Scripture's not clear about,
Yeah.
and those are the mysteries of God that one day on the other side of heaven,
Yeah.
be like, all right, let's talk.
Well, and that's one of the words that our preaching Pastor Chad uses that I love is tension. There's tension there, and tension's important.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the word tension, and so there is tension there. I mean, because there's the tension of God's election and man's responsibility, and they're both true.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
um, you just got to be okay with that tension, and
Yeah.
and and I
Yeah.
am. I'm
Yeah.
perfectly
Yeah.
I'm perfectly okay with that
Yeah.
tension. So um
Yeah.
I had a few other
Yeah.
thoughts. You kind of took me through. I had kind of testimony, but you kind of took me through a little bit of that. But what would you give? What kind of advice would you give to anybody that maybe out there that God's maybe put it on their heart to plant a church? What would you tell them?
Don't do it alone. Number one, do not.
Awesome. Yeah.
I say that, and some people might say, well, obviously, but
Right.
it is insane how many people are out there alone.
Hmm.
They don't have anybody. Um, you need people, absolutely. Not only just people, you need a covering. You need elders. I know there's
Hmm.
so many churches nowadays that you know that's just not a thing anymore. We had
Hmm.
a first time visitor on Sunday, um, who left their church because there was no elders, and he'd been there for years, and he had just found out. And I think it's so important because accountability. So one, and I don't want to get into all that, but man, have people, have somebody that not only covers you but holds you accountable. Um, but also, man, be ready to endure.
Yeah.
You know, I think I went in it, and I think a lot of church planners do go in it thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to open a church, and the people I know and love
Mm-hmm.
are going to come and support me. And I've been telling our staff for a long time, and it's never the people that you think.
Right.
It's never the people you think. And so don't get fixated on the right ones. God's going to send the right people, and the right people are going to show up and help you push what God's laid on your heart. And so be patient. Um, I think even now, our church is only 3 years old, and I'm constantly, my wheels are like, okay, what's next? What's next?
Mm-hmm.
What's next? And I forget to sit in the journey, like,
Yeah.
and look at, the times like, man, you remember when we were pushing couches back, and our kids are in another bedroom, and we're having church, and, you know, uh, just taking it slow, and appreciating the journey that is ahead of you. Because I tell people all the time, and I hope this church exists far beyond any of us. You
Yeah.
know, um, I'm not in this for the next 5, 10 years. I don't want to be the next cool church. Like,
Right.
I want to see faithful, disciples come through our church for generations. I know denominations get a bad rap, but what have you've seen generation after generation after
Yeah.
generation, and most people planning churches aren't a part of denominations, and so that's why I say that.
Yeah.
Don't seek to be the next cool church.
Right.
um, and so um, yeah, don't do it alone. Be patient, enjoy the journey, and man, know that you're going to go through some hard things,
Yeah.
and it's okay.
Yeah.
When we transitioned out of the school into a permanent home, man, kind of, I went through my stage where I experienced the most anxiety I've ever experienced.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, it just drove me to the Lord, and I'm not going to try to say anything that is out of, like, oh, a profound thought. Like,
Right.
it's all things we know. Like, hey, stay grounded in the Lord.
Yeah.
I got
Right.
so busy focusing on, like, getting the church going, and I look back, and I'm like, it's Saturday night, and I'm like, I haven't even prayed about my sermon.
Right. Oh yeah.
That's just me being honest. I haven't even
Yeah.
prayed about my sermon.
Yeah. Right.
And it's like my spiritual health was not good. And so I would encourage the church planner, like, make sure your spiritual health is,
Mm-hmm.
well, and you're taking care of your own soul. Um, and so those are the main things that come to the top of my head. Um, on this, I guess you would say spiritual end. On the practical end, like, um, man,
Yeah.
work hard. Um, and the greatest, I think, advice I've received, and I only got this a couple months ago, um, as a church planner, and as pastors and people in ministry, you hear, like, make sure you have a good balance. Make sure you have a good balance of ministry and family. And I've always heard that. I was always taught that. And
Right.
and the guy said something, this pastor said something that just caused me to have a paradigm shift. And he said, don't try to have a healthy balance. Because when you try to balance things, they end up wanting to combat each other and fight each other. And so it's like, well, I got to have a healthy balance with my church and my family, working, make sure that we can plant this church and that it does lift off, to making sure I have a healthy marriage and
Mm-hmm.
healthy relationship with my kids. He goes, you just have a healthy integration,
That's good.
because when you're in
Yeah.
balance, they're fighting. He goes, no, you need to have healthy integration, because ministry is always going to be a part of your family, and
Mm-hmm.
family is always going to be a part of your ministry. And so I would encourage the church planner, like, man, have a healthy integration.
That's good.
Or, because I mean, my marriage did. There was times where, I mean, we're screaming at each other, like, hey, if this is what it's gonna, if this is what the church is gonna cause on our marriage, this is what the church plant's gonna cause on our marriage. I don't want it, And
Right.
there's times where I was like, you know, is this what we want to do?
Yeah.
And it was because we didn't have a healthy integration, and so that's probably the best advice I could tell a church planner is have a
That's good.
healthy integration, and you know, because that'll cause patience, and if the Lord's really called you to that, and that's part of God's plan, it's gonna happen.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. It's very good. Um, well, let's see. I'm gonna skip this last one because I'll go ahead and ask it.
Yeah, go for it.
What's something you've been either what are you currently maybe with the church or maybe in your personal life? What's some things that you've been recently passionate about studying? What's some things that might fit into that category?
Um, I hate to beat a dead horse, but it's in my own personal life. I'll start with my personal life.
Hmm.
Is healthy integration.
Okay.
Healthy integration. 2 weeks ago, my oldest, plays softball too. I got three kids. I have a 10-year-old, a 5-year-old, Briella, and a 3-year-old, my son, Legend. And we went to her softball tournament. And usually I go Friday, Saturday, and I drive home Saturday so that I can, preach on Sunday.
Hmm.
And 2 weeks ago, now early on in the church, we're trying to just get this thing going. And so now, we've built a team. I have staff
Right.
now.
Right.
I'm sitting with my feet up on the fence at the softball field on a Sunday morning, and we don't stream on our first service. Our second service goes live, and my wife pulls out her phone and she looks at me and she's like, I know you're thinking about it, so I'll check to make sure, everything's going. And I just look at her and I say, man, I'm not. I'm
That's
not.
good.
I am enjoying my daughter playing softball right now.
Yeah.
And I didn't even listen to church until Monday morning. And
That's
so,
good.
man, I've in the last, again, we just celebrated 3 years. In the last 2.5 years, that just wasn't a thing
Right.
for me
Right.
because my mind was constantly on the church and the people. And that sounds so, you can easily make that sound so noble, but it was just unhealthy.
Yeah.
And so
Sure.
just creating healthy rhythms in my life,
Hmm.
um, you know, uh, I've created so much more healthy disciplines. And this might shock some people as like, well, you're a pastor of the church. Like, and I tell people I'm just like you all the time. I get busy, I get focused on the wrong things, and I'm like, man, I need to pray today.
Right. Right.
And so just keeping healthy rhythms in my personal life.
Yeah.
And then for the church, we're really focused. Man, I love that this podcast. I've just focused on our men. Like men, we must be the spiritual leaders of our homes.
Mhm.
We got to start there. One, you got to be a spiritual leader of yourself. You can't lead anybody else if you're not being led. Um, and I hope I'm sure you can appreciate me being real here. I remember our first men's breakfast of our church. There was eight men of us there. And at that time, that weekend, I don't know if you remember Ubi. Uh, I had Ubi come and preach for me.
Yeah.
Nigerian guy from
Uh-huh.
Indiana.
Uh-huh.
Okay. He'd kind of been a staple in my life because I'd call him and I'm like, man, I'm super reformed and God keeps putting me in these churches that are super charismatic. Like, what is he doing? And he's like, man, I got you. I'm reformed and I've been an AG for 20 years and,
Okay.
never got ordained in the AG because he wouldn't sign the confession of faith.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, yeah. So, but the Lord just put him there. And so
Yeah.
anyway, he was coming to preach for me and you might cut this out or not. He goes, what makes a man a man? And he goes, I wrestle with this question, especially now in our day and age. Like people are like, well, what is a man? What is a woman? And he just looked at all of us and he said, it's not because you have a penis between your legs. He goes, that's not what makes you a man. And he took us to the book of Corinthians and he just began to lay out like,
Yeah.
hey, Christ is the head and he covers the man and the man covers the wife and the family. And And so from the beginning, man, I just have had a passion to see
Yeah.
men transformed by God. Um, and 2, 3 weeks ago, we had baptisms, and I don't baptize anybody. And I think so many people find that odd, but I love seeing dads being baptized by our men's director or whatever,
Yeah.
and then they turn around and baptize their wife, they baptize their kids, and
Yes.
I'm just
Yeah.
so passionate about seeing men like
Yeah.
um, lead and lead well and lead strong. And so we've gained families in our church because, man, we got 10 men in the parking lot ready to receive families, you
Yeah.
know? Um, and because I believe for so long the church has just been ran by women,
Yeah.
and not that women aren't capable of leading, but it's so clear that men, this is your role and this is what I've put on you. And so that's one thing that I'm just super passionate about the church, and that's why I appreciate your podcast.
Well, and the thing is, man, and I don't know why in the world you'd think I'd want to cut that out. But I'm leaving that in. So
There you go.
if we, I mean, like I
That's
mean,
gonna get clicks
yeah, that'll get clicks, but that's not why I'm leaving
or
it in. I mean,
cancel me.
yeah, yeah. Here's the thing, though. I mean, and I think this is critical. We live in a day where yeah, I mean that idea of men leading and men being the spiritual, I mean that we kind of live in a day where that you'll hear people saying, well, that's misogynistic or that's patriarchal.
Yeah,
The reality is this: is God has created us with different roles, and that's what it
yeah,
boils down to. I love um I love what and I can't remember who I've heard this from, but God created Eve from the rib, not from the foot to be trampled on, and not from the head to rule over the man, but from the rib to be equal. So
yeah,
women are equal. And I'll be the first to say that women are equal with men,
absolutely.
but we all serve different roles. And it's,
Yeah,
the reality is um women are equipped for certain things. Listen, women are, and I act like it gives me a complex, or I get upset by it, but I love the fact that my little girls, when they're hurt or when they're scared or when they're whatever, they're running to mama. Like, or maybe not when they're scared. When they're scared, they're probably running to me. But when, like, there are certain things that children just want their mama for, and that's okay.
yeah,
That is how God
yeah,
equips us, and those are the
yeah.
roles that we have. And you're absolutely right. The role that God has for the men is to lead the church and to lead the family. And when men don't fill those roles, there's dysfunction.
Yeah.
We have to step it. We have to forget about the noise and the clamor of our society and our culture, and just say, you know what, I'm going to step into the role that God has given me. One of the things that I've had discussions with Sienna, the Heather's cousin that's moved into us, because you can really tell she's influenced a lot by TikTok and all that. And so,
Yeah.
but what I love about her is she'll ask questions, and you can tell that my responses, she's never had those responses before. She's never
Hmm.
she's never she's never heard that. And so we were on the way back from Oklahoma City one time, and she was asking me, "So you're an elder? So does that make Heather an elder?" I said, "No, Heather. I mean, according to the scripture, it's for men, it's reserved for men." She's like, well, why is that? And I just basically said it's a matter of roles, and I explained the whole thing.
Hmm.
Like, we believe that women are equal in dignity and in glory, but it's just we have different roles. We have been equipped for
Hmm.
different roles. My wife, I love her, but she, like, especially, like, this has kind of come out in the softball um that I was talking about earlier. Like my wife gets really emotional when Kinley doesn't get a play. And I'm sitting over thinking the man, the one I'm not emotional about it. I'm like, I think it's good for her. I mean, like, I mean, and
Yeah.
honestly, if I was the coach, I wouldn't play her because there's other girls, especially in team and I mean, whether you agree with that or not, I mean, like, I mean, I think that a coach should, you know, at that age, probably try to play those kids as much as possible. But at the same time,
Hmm.
you know, in tight games and you're playing a really good team, I understand you want to leave your starters in and trying to win the game.
Yeah.
But 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 I also do see that the guy is trying, and so
Yeah.
no, I understand that, and for me, it's not an emotional thing. It's not. I mean, because
Yeah.
me, I'm thinking, man, this is actually probably better for my daughter to sit on the bench and realize that you're not going to because let me add some context to that because like at home through the week I'll say, hey, you want to go out in the backyard and play catch, or hey, you want to go to the field and let me hit you some pop flies, or hey, you want to go work on some batting practice? Nah. And
Nope.
I'm like, okay, then I'm not gonna fight for your playing time if you're not gonna fight for it. If you're not gonna do the hard
Yeah.
part, and I've told her numerous times, I listen, I'll point at at girls that have you can clearly see it. Like one has there's one girl that I've got in mind that her dad's a coach, but she has improved so much. And I'm like, you can tell she's practicing at home. She is not practicing
Yeah.
just when practice is called. She's practicing at home because she wants it. You don't. And so I'm not going to fight for you to play if you don't even want to, you know, if you're not going to fight for yourself, you know. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
to me, that's where I'm just, and again, that's just to illustrate the different ways that men and women are equipped. Whereas women are equipped to be more emotional, and so they can have a little bit more empathy for my child than I can. But
Hmm.
you also need the man and the men and women. There's a reason God put a husband and a wife as as you know the parents of a family is because we're both
Yes.
equipped for different roles. So
Yeah. And let's make this a little juicier.
yeah.
We've talked about disagreeing and being able to we're a little different of how we um and I want to just kind of talk it out. Yeah, we have three pastors, myself, two other pastors, men who are
Mhm.
considered the elders of our church. But when I was ordained as an elder, my wife was sitting next to me when what quote unquote we got ordained. Um,
Mhm.
and here's kind of where I'm at. And I'm not going to say I'm passionate about it, or this is one of those fun lanes that I like to go down
Yeah, sure.
in
Yeah.
my free time. I think we've created a lot of false dichotomies in the church. Like it's either this, I think it's because we know that there's truth and there's not truth. Okay,
Mhm.
there's
Sure.
absolute truth, absolutely. But I think we've put that on everything. That it's got to be this or that, and so I think it'd be on our end. I think it's foolish to say that your wife doesn't have a say in
Mhm.
the church's direction.
Sure.
And here's what I mean. In our elders meeting, it's us three men.
Right.
Okay. And so same for you guys, probably it's just the men there. But we say, but our wives are there.
Oh,
You know why
yeah.
our wives are
Oh,
there?
yeah.
You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
we're like, man, we're going to our wives and we're saying, hey, we're talking about this tonight in our elder meeting for the health of the church, the moving forward of our church. Like, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that,
Mhm.
and so because we become one flesh, it's like, and I say all that because anybody listening to this podcast is, again, it's not that women can't, or
Oh,
women
yeah,
like,
right.
or in the sense of women can't have a say in the church. Like they absolutely have a say in the church.
Yep.
All we're saying is like, men, you're leading now. Like you're making this go, and so yeah, and I just wanted to bring that up just to make it a little juice.
No,
Like,
yeah,
hey, like this is our view on it and where
right.
we're at, and so
Well, I go back to the what was it when you said that you kind of had basically said, I'm done with ministry. And then
Yeah.
what was it was your wife that came to you and said, hey, if God's called you to do it, you need to do it. And so, yeah, I mean, I've said that, that I mean, there's a reason why an elder, I think there's a reason why Paul said he needs to be the husband to one wife,
One
because
wife.
because it, you have I, there's a purpose, there's a reason why they're there. And I remember we were doing a panel of some sort, and I looked at my wife, and it kind of like made me just kind of like really kind of got me emotional. But I looked at her and I said, listen, the reality is I don't want you to hold me accountable, but I
Mhm.
need you to. Like I'm just
Yeah.
telling you, my heart, I don't want that, but I know that
Yeah.
I need you to. So it's
Yeah.
like so if you say something to me and I roll my eyes or I get upset, let me get upset, because I need that in my life. I need that person that's kind of like holding me to the fire and saying, listen, bro, you need to do something different. We don't
Yeah.
like it as men. We don't like it because, again, we have
Yeah.
that pride or whatever it is that kind of rises up in it. But God, we need it, man. We absolutely need those ladies in our life to stir us,
Mhm.
to push us to. And yeah, I mean, like I'll ask Heather stuff all the time. Hey, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
And what I love about my wife is she just tells it like it is, and she's like, no, I think that's
Yeah.
stupid. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. All right. Real theological there,
Yeah.
but again, I mean, it's
Yeah.
not to
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is, so I didn't grow up in church.
right.
When I got to master's commission, that is the most in depth I've ever gotten into a church,
Mm-hmm.
and so I asked a lot of questions, and so now I'm just like, well, maybe we're communicating the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to learn how to communicate it in a different way
Right.
than what it's always been communicated as. Um, because even in the sense of like men and leaders and being pastoral, I'm telling people like, man, we're called to be gentle. We need more
Mm-hmm.
gentle pastors
Yeah.
in the sense of meekness or whatever. And
Right.
uh, because I know probably in the day and age that you grew up in church, it was very like, I'm the man and I'm the leader and I'm the man of God and we're gonna lead this way. And I'm like, man, we're called, yeah, we're called to be bold, but we're not called to be brash.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I'm okay with communicating things in a more gentle. And I know some might seem, well, that's soft and that's not manly. But you know what? God's called us to be meek men.
Yeah.
And I love, back to Joe Rogan. He said, man, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And he
Yeah.
goes, as men, we have to learn how to tame that,
Yeah.
and we can do both. And so, yeah, I think just even hearing you talk, I'm literally thinking out loud, like, you know what? Maybe I'm just trying to communicate it at a different angle for people.
Yeah.
Because we land in the same place.
Yeah.
It's
Oh
just
yeah. Absolutely.
communicated differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, final advice. I'll let you kind of wrap it up with the final word or final advice to any men that might tune in and listen to the podcast.
Yeah. Man, what I just encourage men um, to do is just start somewhere. Man, start. You don't read your Bible? Open that thing up. Start in go learn about Jesus. Go read about him. What was he like? How did he treat people? How all the different things. Just start. Open it. I tell people, and they probably have never heard a pastor say this. I don't read my Bible. I listen to my Bible. So go listen to your
Yeah.
Bible. You know, if you can't read, or in the sense of like, I just don't understand it or I can't focus, man, listen to it. There's so many resources um, for us now. One of the best apps that our men's director puts our men on is called Through the Word. Um, Go download it, man. The guy gives context of what's happening of the early church, whatever scripture you're reading, and he gives like a 8-minute, 5-minute, and then you go in and he reads you that passage,
Oh,
and then
wow.
you're listening to it like, oh wow, like that's now I get it, now I
Okay.
understand it, and so Through the Word, if you want to be a man of the Word, go download Through the Word,
Okay.
and if they want to pay me for this, they can pay me for this, but Through the Word.
Plug.
Uh, and man, prayer, obviously start praying. And I'm telling our men that doesn't look like a wake up at 5 a.m. And that looks like while you're driving to work, like, hey, God, will you
Yeah.
will you be with me today?
Yeah.
God, will you bless my wife today? God, thank you for my wife today. Thank you that she cares for us and loves us and make sure our family's taken care of. God, thank you for the ability to provide for my family. Just simple prayers like that. At 3 o'clock, God, I'm really frustrated.
Yeah.
Help me not choke this person. Help me have self-control,
Right.
just making it more real. It doesn't have to be these long, beautiful, eloquent prayers. And honestly, I'd argue that scripture discourages us from that.
Yeah.
And so, man, get in the word, pray, and then get to church. I can't say that. I used to think, I'm telling people, now that I'm only 3 years in, but I used to think pastors were like, you need to be in church. You need to be in church more for ego.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you just want more people in seats. You just want to fill your building. And I cannot stress enough, get to church.
Yeah.
Like it is so vital to your spiritual health. To you need godly friend. We think we get away from as kids, oh, you need good friends, but when you become an adult, you can hang out with anybody you want. And that's just not true.
Right.
You
Yeah.
need
No.
you need not only don't just go to church. Language we're using here at Real Church is you need to belong to your church.
Yeah.
Belong to your church. You need to be serving. You need to teach your family what it looks like to serve. You need to say, hey, son, come on, we're greeting today. Hey, daughter, come on,
Right.
we're opening door today. You know, and so get in the word, pray, and belong to a church. Those you start there, I promise you, in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years, you're going to look back and see the growth that you've had in your relationship with God. And before you know it, you're going to be leading a small group. You're going to be speaking at a men's breakfast. You're going to be leading people to Christ. You're going to be baptizing people. And you'll look back and be like, man, I can't believe I'm in this place now.
Yeah.
All because you just opened your word, you prayed, and you belong to a church. And so, men, man, just start. That's all I encourage men to do, and watch God work in you and through you.
Well, I can't say it any better than that, man. I appreciate you. Like I said, I appreciate you coming on today, and we will have to do this again. I always worry. So like in a couple of our podcasts, I've kind of had kind of a path, charted and everything. And I kind of had some things in mind for you, but kind
Yeah.
of worried. It's like, man, I kind of feel a little unprepared for this morning, but what if we only go 20 minutes, and we've gone certainly longer than 20 minutes. So
Oh, my wife says I can talk through my elbows, so
yeah,
I could.
I shouldn't worry about it either, 'cause I'm the same way. So
Well, and I remember those talks we had in your office, man. I remember sit there, and mainly it was because I was trying to skip my schoolwork, but
right.
but I also appreciated our conversations, and so yeah, let's do it again, man. I'd love to.
Okay.
And hopefully one day I can have you on our podcast once we
Yeah,
start.
yeah. Love to. I'd love to, man. Yeah, just let me know whenever. This has been a production of Men of the King. We'd like to thank all of our listeners. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and go check us out at menoftheking.com. Until next time, men, go serve your king.